I'm Mimi Baines, and this is my Formula 1 Brazil Grand Prix race review. Let's get straight into it. So to start off with, we have to have a little bit of a chat about qualifying and the sprint. Qualifying, we had the shock pole with Kevin Magnussen starting in P1 in the Haas. That was incredible. And it was a little bit bonkers to see that we had K-Mag starting on pole, and then we had Mick Schumacher starting in P20. It was like the whole grid was in a Haas sandwich. It was definitely not what anyone was expecting walking out on Friday morning. We then had George Russell in P2 and Max Verstappen still hanging in there in P3. He just was unfortunate with the weather, and obviously George Russell's spin off brought qualifying to an early close and it never got restarted because of the rain. Then we had possibly the best sprint race we have ever had. Sprint race is a new format to Formula 1. We've only had 3 races this year, and it was just amazing. I don't have the words to describe how good it was. It was absolutely insane. It was 24 laps of heavy Formula 1 action. There was overtakes. I actually think I heard a stat. There were 32 overtakes in 24 laps, which is bonkers. Obviously, the main man, Mr. Saturday, George Russell, finished the sprint in P1, which meant that he would start the Grand Prix on pole position. Max Verstappen was very unlucky in the sprint. He was the only one, apart from Latifi, to go out on mediums, and he just could not get those tyres to wake up. Everyone else on the soft, and they were just steaming past him at the end. So Max actually finished the sprint in P4, which was not where anyone would have thought that Max would have been. We also have to give a special shout out, of course, to Lewis Hamilton for coming from 7th to finish P3 in the race. He actually then would start the Grand Prix P2 because Carlos Sainz took an engine penalty. So, on to the race. After all the excitement from qualifying and from the sprint, everyone was a little bit hesitant of what to expect. Was it going to be as good as everyone was hyping it up to be? And boy, it was. There was so much drama to unpick, so let's just go through a few of the key points for you. To start off with, we had Kevin Magnussen and Daniel Ricciardo coming together on the opening lap, which brought out the safety car straight away. Poor Danny Rick in his penultimate race with McLaren. This was not how he wanted to finish it, and he actually now has a 3-place grid drop for his last race with McLaren in Abu Dhabi, which is not what anyone wants to see at all. Everyone just holding back the tears because I know everyone is a Daniel Ricciardo fan. Can't even hide it. Everyone is. So it's fine. We'll move on. He's hopefully going to have a reserve seat next year, and then he's hoping he'll come back in 2024. Anyway, getting back on track to the race. Of course, it was good to see Kevin Magnussen out as well after his amazing qualifying on Friday. So after the safety car restart, we then had further drama with former championship rivals Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton coming together under the safety car restart. Max Verstappen did end up getting a 5-second time penalty for this, which he then served as he went back into his pit stop. But it's a little bit controversial because quite a lot of people think that it was actually Lewis who was to fault for this, and Lewis himself even came on the radio straight after saying it was a racing incident, not saying that it was Max's fault. So you do have to question if it actually was Lewis's fault or if it was Max, as the FIA ruled. End of the day though, FIA ruled that it was Max Verstappen who was at fault, so Max got the penalty. Then a couple of corners after this incident, Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc also came together, with Leclerc nearly binning it in the wall. Leclerc actually managed to come through to finish P4, which is very, very impressive considering he was literally centimetres from being out of the race. Lando Norris was not so lucky, and after having his penalty, he did actually retire from the race and have to pull over because there was an issue with his car. So it does mean there was a double DNF for McLaren, which is not great in their championship battle with Alpine, who now go into the final race 19 points ahead of McLaren. With Norris's retirement, we did have another safety car while that car was removed. It was a very good start for Mercedes, with both cars hanging on to P1 and P2, which was the positions they were in at this point. We then had poor Sergio Perez suffering on medium tyres. The medium tyres have not been good this weekend. It has been clear that the soft has been the favourable tyre. It just reacts so much better. They could not get the temperatures potentially into the mediums this weekend, but it did mean that after the safety car restart, after Norris's retirement, Sergio Perez did end up getting passed by both Ferraris and eventually his teammate Max Verstappen. We'll come on to that drama in a little bit. I just want to finish off the race. We had George and Lewis actually battling it out for the win, about 10 laps to the end, I think. Lewis was about 1.3 seconds behind George the whole way, but George was just so good. He didn't make a mistake. He did actually admit to making one teeny tiny mistake, but we'll forgive him because we didn't notice that bit. It wasn't on TV. But it was such a great race, and George Russell took his first ever win in Formula One, which I think, even if you're not a Mercedes fan, you have to be happy for George Russell to finally have won his first Grand Prix after coming so close on so many occasions. It must be nice for Mercedes to have a little 1-2 after having so many issues throughout this season. To finally take home a 1-2 has to be what they have been looking for. Red Bull, on the other hand, had a little bit of controversy in the last lap. So, as I mentioned, Max Verstappen went past Sergio Perez with the plan to try and get past Alonso and Leclerc so that Red Bull could get some more points. However, he was only allowed to go through on the understanding that if he couldn't pass those cars, Max would have to give the place back to Checo. When it came to the last lap, Max hadn't got any further. His engineer came on the radio asking him to give the place back, but Max refused. Now, you do have to question why Max did this. It doesn't look great considering how helpful Checo has been throughout the year. He has 100% been instrumental in Max winning not only last year's championship, but this year's and the Constructors. So it possibly is a little bit short-sighted of Max to not let Checo through, because there may well be times next year where Max needs to go past Checo to win his championship. And well, after Checo was not allowed to go through by Max, is he going to be so quick to move over and let his teammate through in the future? I don't think so. I mean, I personally wouldn't be, but we'll have to wait and see how it folds out. But you could see that Checo was quite annoyed by it. I think his team radio message said it as well. And also in the paddock afterwards, he was not happy with Max. Christian Horner did say that they have spoken about it and they have addressed it, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. The team have come out and said that in Abu Dhabi they will be working to try and get Perez to get as many points as possible, and Max is going to help if he can, but something tells me Max is going to make sure he is nowhere near Sergio Perez, that he doesn't have to help him. But as I say, we'll have to wait and see what happens. It is our final race weekend next weekend, the season finale in Abu Dhabi. A few key battles that we're all going to be looking at too. As I mentioned before, Alpine and McLaren. Alpine are now 19 points ahead of McLaren going into the final race. So can they hang on? Another battle is with Mercedes and Ferrari for P2 in the Constructors. And considering this is Mercedes' first win this season, that is pretty bonkers that they could be walking away with P2 next weekend. They are also 19 points behind Ferrari. So it's not the most likely, but you never know in Formula One. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So tune in next week for my final race review of the season. See you there.